So moving on to the kind of the best of all possible worlds defense here.
All right, so this is the next one, right? So now that's the soul-making one. So the next one here is the best of all possible worlds defense. Right. So this is this, and he kind of likes this one, right? He attempts to, at least to a certain extent, defends this one, right?
Yeah, and the kind of the people that we get into are fairly maligned by one side and put up a lot on the other. But we talk about the brilliant German Lutheran philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
That's right.
And so
I like saying that too.
the nuclear vessels. And so he lived roughly between 1646 and 1716. Kind of give you a date there.
Yeah, so he was kind of a contemporary of Isaac Newton.
Yeah,
in fact, they had an ongoing spat about,
Yeah, in more ways than one. But he first propounded the idea that a God of unbridled perfection would create the best world possible. So you have this idea of a God imperfect in every quality, in every aspect. And so what type of world or universe would that type of God create? Well, it would be the greatest possible world you could ever imagine. The greatest show on earth.
That's right. The best possible world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. God's the P.T. Barnum. Well, I don't know how far you want to take that implication there. Yeah. And so that such a world must contain evil. Why? Because that's the qualities of God that are put forth in Scripture. And so we know that evil exists. And so therefore, the best possible world must contain evil. So he has his explanation there as the best of all possible worlds. So this is a best of all possible world because God's the best possible being and contains evil. Therefore, it's a necessary part of the best possible world or universe. So the best of all possible worlds defense is another variation of the greater good defense. For example, Leibniz says, God cooperates morally in moral evil, that is, in sin without being the originator of sin, and even without being accessory thereto. He does this by permitting it justly and by directing it wisely towards good.
Right, so we have God cooperating, right, morally with evil. He cooperates it in terms of he uses it, is the idea.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he says the best of all possible world defense proceeds from a consideration of the essential attributes that God would necessarily have. So this one takes into account who God is, God's character, God's attributes, right? This means that God, being infinite and omniscient, all-knowing, knows every possible good world, state of affairs is what he's talking about here, right? Not just a planet, right? But a state of affairs, right? Upon surveying all these various states of affairs, these various worlds, God knows which one is superior to all others, and that's the one that he chooses, right? And so because God is supremely wise and good, he chooses to create that single world that he deems perfect, even though, ironically, he tells us, it contains, some sin and, imperfections, right? So this one's kind of interesting. We take God's character into effect. He's wise and, he's infinite. And so he surveys all the kinds of possible worlds, all the kinds of states of affairs, and says, all right, in his perfection, he chooses the perfect, the best of all possible worlds. And that's the one that he chooses to make. And apparently, we see it has imperfections and evil as part of it. But since God is perfect, he chooses the perfect world, right? The best of all possible worlds.
And so because the universe is contingent on God's act of creation, it means that he doesn't have to create that world. But when he does, it also gives him the ability to have a plan for that evil that he will actualize, knowing that it's the best possible world. He knows that evil will come about in it. So he can plan for the salvific work of Christ's actions on the cross applied to people that come to faith through that process and the mercy. He can do that before the foundation of that world. So that's the plan he comes up with. The universe is created, and so therefore he's not surprised that he has to send his only son into the world. He, all the verses that talk about predestining the accomplishments and acts of the cross and all the people leading up to it, it makes that plan able to be known beforehand, essentially. Yeah. So it doesn't catch God off surprise there. So while one can imagine worlds with far less evil or no evil at all, those worlds overall cannot be construed as better. Why? Because otherwise God would have considered them as superior to the world he made. Mm-hmm. So yes, I can think of a world where nothing bad happens to me. That's a better world for me. But is that a better world for the perfect being of God to
That's
create?
Right. For all of creation and what the perfect being of God would do, yeah.
So if a better world is possible and God did not create such a world, then his supreme goodness is maligned.
Right. So he's not as good as he could be if he didn't create the best possible world, right?